good evening to our viewers and listeners across Grenada, Carriacou, PT Martinique, the Caribbean, the rest of the known world, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'll be a facilitator this evening, filling in for Mr. Colin Dow. My name is Russel John. We thank you again for joining us this evening as we take you beyond the headlines. Now, in recent times, we've had a rise in violence and particularly gun-related violence in Grenada. Our legislators, our policymakers have begun responding with measures aimed at curbing the rise in violence. So the question that we hope to answer this evening, amidst all of this, is there a need for harsher penalties? Joining me in studio, to my immediate left, Pastor Stamford Simon. He's the head of the St. George's Baptist Church. And alongside him, Assistant Commissioner of Police, ACP Vanny Cohen. Joining us via the Zoom platform, Mr. Ali Gill, a stalwart attorney at law, and Mr. Gavin Hira. He's a regional securities consultant based in Trinidad. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Good evening to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So I want us to begin this evening's discussion in a personal way. I'm going to give you a minute. Take me back to your most impactful, most memorable experience with discipline, the penal system, punishment.
Mine is clear. I could never forget it. My mother, I stole $5 from her, where I think she didn't remember it's there, and I went and fed my friends. And she asked for who took the $5 after about a week, because she had it there. And in so doing, I didn't say anything. My brother said he saw me buying sweetie and so forth. So he knew it was me. She took me up, and those rope they used to use from the boat. My father used to work on a boat. She took me inside the room, and she beat my hand. Do not pick up where you don't put down. Do not pick up where you don't put down. From that day on, I was very clear in my mind. I should not touch anything I did not put on. And since then, I have not done that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Pastor Simon.
I personally have grown up with a mother who didn't spare the rod to ensure that I had it. But I don't think those at all form the basis for the most memorable time I had. I would chalk that up to an experience I had at PBC. Something I said once in school, and the Dean of Discipline, Mr. Andrews, heard it. And I wasn't punished for it physically. But what he said and how he dealt with it is an impression that was left with me for the rest of my life. I think that has channeled who I have become, and I always go back to it to stay on course. I think that is my most memorable time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Mr. Gill, how about you?
Had with regards to discipline was being a student at the Grenada Boys Secondary School and sitting at the feet of one Victor Ashby. And very simple lessons. We were admonished, one, not to be eating on the streets, two, to use the washroom during break and lunch and before and after school. Those simple lessons remain with me. Of course, there is always the dread to sit on the green bench in particular, and the brown bench less so. But I believe that these different measures of disciplining students that was employed in my time at the Grenada Boys Secondary School definitely impacted me with regards to punctuality, with regards to hard work, with regards to discipline and so on. And so I believe that my time at the Grenada Boys Secondary School, not just with of course the principal, Mr. Ashby, with the teachers and so, I believe that those years, when one reflects, I believe that it has, made not just myself, but most of us from the GBSS to men of today.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Gill. Mr. Hero, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. John. Okay, good night. Before I start, I just want to use the opportunity to say a very special good night to you and to your team in the studio for making tonight's discussion, possible, and to also the wonderful people of Grenada who are tuning in, both our listening and viewing public, and of course to the esteemed panel to which I'm very privileged to be part of tonight. We can go back, we can send the tape all the way back to our childhood days and our exposure to punishment and to discipline, and we'll have all of the stories that some of the members would have shared already, growing up, primary school, parenting, whatever. But for me specific, it takes me right back to the institution to which I had belonged, and that was the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force. And I served in the element of the Coast Guard and the air wing of the military. And growing up there, in that as a young man in that institution as a career, exposed to the various aspects of rules and regulations and standard operating procedures, allowed me to understand and to behave in a way that was disciplined. Because if you slip left or you slip right or you went off track, you'd have been disciplined where you could have been charged and you'd have faced punishment and all of the necessary, what we'll call access to what happens to a young military person. You could have actually made military jail, to be quite truthful, or you could have lost your pay. So growing up in that institution allowed me to remain disciplined, to understand the concept of punishment, but more so obeying the rules of the day. And that has allowed me to instill that even into my aspect of parenting with my children, for them to understand living in a disciplined household, doing what is right. And if you do wrong, you face the consequences. So definitely for me, my war story would definitely be growing up in the Defence Force and understanding rules, regulations, standard operating procedures, and operating in an element of discipline. Otherwise, you face the consequences of punishment.
Thank you so much for sharing. Action and consequences seems to be the theme right across the board. I may circle back to a few of these as the conversation develops. But you guys come from various walks of life. We have the church, we have the legal system, we have private sector, we have the legal fraternity, and you have different viewpoints. So I want to just give me a sense, looking back on 2024, looking back on what's happening and what's been happening in Grenada over the course of the year. What's your outlook on Grenada? How have we fared thus far? And I'll start with you, ACP Cohen, and then we'll move to Pastor Simon.
Well, I will speak particularly to my areas of expertise, which is law enforcement. We have seen an unusual upsurge in gun crimes in 2024. That was astonishing, but we were equally to the task. We have had one of our highest seizure of illegal firearms in 2024. And so commensurate with the high levels of gun crimes and gun violence was also a success story for us in receiving those, make sure that we take a lot of those off the street. 2024 was not a defining year for us. I mean, for some people, the level of murders that we have had was alarming, but that was not the year that we have had the highest. So from where I sit, it was not alarming for me at all. Critical, though, was for us to ensure that we instill or develop programs, getting into the minds of young people, having social programs, in the communities that can reduce the fear of crime and reduce the tendency for young people to be involved in crime. It was an awakening year for us in various ways, not that alarming being that, it has been the highest, but it kind of set some, allow us to set some benchmark for ourselves in where we want to go, how we want to get there, what are the drivers that can get us to where we want to go to ensure that Grenada remains one of the safest destinations. We have alluded that, we say that every day, but it's a lot of work to maintain where we are at. We are the envy of the Caribbean in a lot of ways, but that is not just saying it, right. It's doing it, and not just law enforcement doing it. It's how does law enforcement work collaboratively with everybody else to ensure that peace, safety, and security becomes shared responsibility.
Excellent. Well said. Pastor Simon, what about you?
I think looking at where we are, and I think the indiscipline that you see in the society and community, where the respect for authority, where both from adult and even from the younger children, where people feel they could do what they want and say what they want to anybody. We've had where you look and you see that people are no longer respecting authority, and the children then is following that. I guess the North American style of behavior is becoming much more common. I also think that the church have not done enough and is doing enough in community events that we once had, been more involved in the community. I think the church have withdrawn from the community more than we in the community for whatever reason. I think that in itself has hindered the and put to bear what is happening, where a lot of our young children who are not do not have parents in the home, because both parents are working before you their grandmother home or grandfather home. Today you have less of that in the home. Everybody's over the daycare center, children are home on their own. They put them in front of the television screen, and that in itself is impacting, because when they come to the church, you're seeing the indiscipline, and the church don't have to try to do it. Or if you go to the school, it's you see it, and you hear the teachers talk about it. And I think for us as a church, I think putting ourselves more out there and being more involved in the community is going to be essential to see a change in direction, and helping the community to see that they need to be more involved in the life of the people.
Excellent. So rising violence, ill discipline. Mr. Gill, can you weigh in here?
Well, I think for the last couple of months, what we have experienced is an increase in gun-related violence that in recent times have resulted in fatalities. While that have not started this year in 2023, I think we had a rather shocking incident too in late July, August 2023. But for this year, we've had quite a few, many, of course. We have 3 shooting fatalities. We had other shooting incidents where persons were injured, and that has shocked the very fabric of the Grenadian society, because while we've had in the past, and ACP Cohen spoke to it, more homicides in other years, and we have not yet. This is just the 6th month of the year, frankly. But the incidences of drive-by shooting that is related to gangs and so on, that is alien to the Grenadian society. And as such, we are in a situation where we really and truly don't want to find ourselves. That has led to the Grenada Bar Association, of course, embarking on a peace initiative, where we have engaged the Chamber of Commerce, the trade union organization, and other civil society and so on, to see what is it we can do to stem that spike in gun-related violence. We say ceasefire now, and by that we launched our program today. And we are hoping to reach out to the different communities and so that are directly affected, but also to get into the schools, and so using persons with the relevant expertise, of course, to engage young persons and so on. But also to comment on the subject that is at hand on this program this evening: is there a need for harsher penalties? I believe that there is a need for comprehensive criminal justice reform. That's where we really need to go. Speaking of harsher penalties, only speak to one thing, and I believe that as we go through the program tonight, I can get to comment on that further. But with regards to sentencing principles used by the court, there are generally 4 broad principles which we use, and that is 1, deterrence; 2, retribution, and that's where penalties probably come under the issues of retribution and deterrence. But we also look at the areas of rehabilitation and prevention. And of course, we in Grenada, I believe our first step that we want to examine, that we want to take a comprehensive look at, is the issue of prevention. How did we get here? Where did we go wrong? How can we correct it? How can we nip it in the bud? These are some of the issues that I really hope that we can find some time to address in this evening's program.
Excellent, well said, and we definitely will delve deeper into those issues. Mr. Hero, I'd like you to come in here. You've heard the assessments from these different areas.
Yeah.
You're well versed in this area and dealing with these gun-related incidences. Where do you see Grenada going? What exactly do we need to take control of to ensure that we don't end up in a spiral out of control and in a situation where there's fear and panic across the nation?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I need to compliment each and every panelist here tonight, because their contributions were phenomenal. They actually speak to a specific area of focus as we look at this issue holistically. And my colleague from the legal fraternity was quite correct. It needs to be looked at in a totality of reform. But we not to pacify the issue in any way, but this is not a Grenada problem. This is a regional issue. This is happening all over the Caribbean. And when you look at the various, our neighbors, Trinidad, for instance, we're having our hands full with the issue going to a different direction when it comes to blatant disregard for life and blatant disregard for law enforcement and utilizing high-powered weapons and the arms trade. You see it in all of the other countries. And one of the key issues that we have been picking up in our research is the ideology. And I think one or two of the panelists spoke about that. How has this ideology been able to creep in to our society, into our social fabric, as was indicated, and how did this thing penetrate to what was the culture and the foundation and the upbringing of Caribbean villages and Caribbean people. And now we see this ideology now penetrating and breaching our culture and our think pattern, so that more importantly now we're seeing a direction, a diversion of our young people towards violence. We have the infiltration of the video games, don't put that off the table at all, and we have the infiltration of violent music, which has also been a sort of influence to a certain type of behavior and attitude. And with that comes the elephant that is in the room, which is transnational organized crime. And this has affected society, safety, and security. No longer are we feeling safe in our Caribbean countries. No longer are we feeling safe in Grenada, for instance. And just as one of the panelists alluded to, and again, we want to be identified as the destination, a vacation destination where globally citizens would want to come to Grenada to be comfortable, to be rid of all of the issues of the normal global hustle and bustle and relax and enjoy this beautiful Spice Isle. But with that sort of violence and issues of investment, would people want to come into Grenada and invest? Would tourists want to come to Grenada and visit if there is a sensitization of violence and gang warfare and shootings and drive-bys and drug trafficking? All of those issues has to play an important role in the holistic reform. So I think it's a good place to begin the conversation. And Grenada is in the spotlight as we speak. And if we don't fix this like yesterday, we are going to go down a slippery slope. So it is very important to include the collaborative approach of a whole of government and a sort of what I call a holistic approach to bringing the solutions to the table.
Excellent. I want us to jump straight into this question. And Mr. Gill, I'm going to save you for last because you've already answered to some extent. The question on the table. You said we need to act now. We're heading down a slippery slope. We don't want to go there. One of the solutions put forward is that we increase the penalties. Every panelist this evening has mentioned the way discipline has affected and prevented them from going down the wrong road. I want to ask you first, Pastor Simon. ACP Cohen, you will weigh in, and Mr. Hero will come back to you and round up with Mr. Gill. Do we need harsher penalties?
I don't think harsher penalties will solve the problem. We had to go back to the fundamental, which is the home where children are brought up, and was rightly mentioned about the video games, where parents now are now giving their children their phone and their tablet and like a pastime, and give them, and they can do what they want on it. That is creating a problem. Also, you have the situation where we need to look at what community events that is happening to reach these children, right? If you go through the villages across Grenada now, you hardly seen children in the playing field. The playing field are empty on afternoons. There is not that outside. Everybody's inside and on a screen. That's one. I think also the church playing a holistic approach, and not just we preaching to ourselves and within the four walls of our church, but getting more involved and seeing what is happening there, and see what the programs government is doing and the police is doing. And so collectively we have to address it, because harsher penalties just create more problems for us. We have to solve it at the core, for which I think we need to address how the society has changed, right? The importation of violence from North America through the screen, and our young men. And I was thinking about it. If you look at a lot of the violence we're having, most of the children are after the revolution. They are the ones that are creating the problem. So what has happened after 1983 in terms of the children who were born in that period? What about them that is creating the issues that we are now confronted with? Have we then, after that, more parents are now working, and no longer the parent is no longer there for our children? The morals, like Mr. Ali Gill was saying, in our school, Mr. Ashby and the discipline. I remember going to school, Miss Thomas and the discipline. You had to go and get your time and rip and come back and get your licks. There was certain things, but the community was involved in bringing us up after that change. And I think that in itself, harsher penalties for me will not solve the problem. I think it would only make it worse. I think we need to find a mechanism of able to collectively address it, of how then we can get the younger people to think differently.
Okay. ACP Cohen?
No, I have to be careful how I answer this question. You would have to appreciate the fact that I'm a public officer.
Yes, sir.
The government has just passed a law increasing the penalty, particularly for drug offenses.
Right.
I'm sorry, for firearms.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I'm a student of criminology, and I have to follow the science. So if I differ from government's position, I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I don't believe harsher punishment will act as a deterrent. The literature doesn't support it. I mean, in my studies, there is no way I found anything that says that if you increase the penalty, you're going to reduce the crime. What the literature seems to suggest, though, is that the fear of being apprehended is more deterrent than harsher punishment. And we have seen that by our own experiences. There is data that suggests that 60% of people who go to prison have been to prison before.
Right.
60% of people who were in prison before. So it shows that it did not work. I think there has to be more than just the punishment, and I think Ali alluded to that earlier on when he spoke. There has to be a whole of government approach. There has to be the social services arm of the country that gets involved. There has to be the reduction of unemployment. There has to be education, increasing wages, because we have to look at the root causes of crime. Just punishment in and of itself will not act as a deterrent. There have to be a holistic approach. We have to revisit where we came from. We have to really, we have to visit causation.
Right.
What has caused? What are the factors that cause crime? In fact, there is some literature that suggests that prison in and of itself are more crimogenic than anything else. And so I do not personally believe, and the literature does not support, that harsher punishment will act as a deterrent. There has to be more than just the back end of it, which is the punishment. everything needs to be on board. There has to be a broader discussion.
Right.
Other people need to sit at the table rather than just the law enforcement and the court. Yeah? Pastor Simon spoke about the church not being as involved as they need to be. That's an arm that needs to get on board. The social fabric of our community, we need to get back to the way we grew up. As a child, it was said that it takes a village to raise a child. No, you cannot speak to a child at all because the mother and the father comes after you with the cutlass and the gun. So we need to revisit those. We need to go back to those days. We need to ensure that they're all hands on deck. Crime and the fear of crime has become a shared responsibility, not for law enforcement, not for the legal system, but for the whole of government. Every community, every organization must play its part. Today we've had a very engaging discussion with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, and that's the kind of collaboration that we realize that we need. And so we've started to talk, how can we partner together? They have an interest in crime because they're the hotel sector, and as Mr. Hera said, if crime continue to rise, you know what's going to happen to our economy. Investors will not come in, there will not be investment, there'll be the fear of crime, people will pull out of the country. So every sector of society have a part to play. And unless and until every sector comes to the table, I don't think we will be addressing the issue of crime. So punishment in and of itself, harsher punishment, that's not going to get us anywhere.
Great. So we have two no's. Mr. Hera, where are you on this?
Yeah. So I want to give a sort of overarching review and then speak specific to the question. And I'm thankful for the angle that our pastor took because he is correct. The church plays an integral role. It's a connector. The church is the gatekeeper regarding the communities. And what has happened, and we have seen it in my research throughout the region, that there now comes a separation between law enforcement and the community or the citizenry. It becomes a we and them. And no longer does the community want to trust or to work or to support or to collaborate with law enforcement. They see law enforcement as the blue flashing light is going to kick down their door and arrest their sons and daughters or whatever and create a whole chaos in a village. And then the phones go up and the videoing starts up and it goes viral. Nobody talks about the pre and the post of the incident. They capture certain things and that goes in the next direction, and then the public opinion, the police and law enforcement is always look at the big bad wolves. And therefore, the production of the bridging of that, breaking the walls and building the bridges is where the church and the role of the church comes into play. And this is in no way, and I know Pastor is not speaking about it, and neither am I, this is not religion. We are talking about the issue of the church as a community pillar that bridges the gap between law enforcement and the citizenry. I wanted to say that and to say that specifically. And I'm endorsing to some extent what the ACP is saying, but I'm disagreeing in the fact that harsher penalties will in fact cause those who are committing crimes to think twice. More importantly, what has to happen with harsher penalties, and the ACP spoke about it, is there has to be a tandem of the collaborative approach for the entire society holistically. But more importantly, if we have penalties, but our law enforcement is not trained, equipped, resourced, and more importantly, involved in engagement regarding enforcing the penalties, then it makes no sense. All we have is very good laws that can get people arrested on, but we do not have enforcement. And that enforcement is what brings the whole prevention aspect to the table. That enforcement is the educated officer who can utilize the tools of his trade, which is the law, including harsher penalties, to have people arrested and go through the prosecutorial process to end up being incarcerated in our jails. But this is the prison system now. So that's why I said holistically, is our prison system equipped now, upgraded and ready for that new surge of arrestees, new entrants or old entrants who might have been those who have recommitted crime, reoccurrences, back into the prison system? And is the prison system now equipped and structured in such a way for that sort of reformation that Mr. Gill spoke about? So that is why I would say it has to be holistic. But one thing in closing in this comment, there is something known as the crime triangle that was created in my research, and it starts with the apex of the triangle, which is the criminal. To the left side is the crime, and the next side is the environment. And if we look at that crime triangle, the criminal, the crime, and the environment, it now tells us as a country, inclusive of the business sector and of course the NGOs, which one of these angles do we want to focus on? You focus hard on the criminal and you break that triangle trend, you will affect the growth of crime and what is called that whole surge of crime in your country. If you go at the environment, then you can fix the environment that will not encourage crime. Or if you go at the crime itself, what are the new trends? What is happening? What are the new type of crimes that we are seeing, so that we have a holistic approach to any one of these angles, and we can fix the issue going forward. But it needs to show the ACP and his people can't do it alone. It has to be a Grenada issue. We have to see the colors of Grenada. Our nationalism has to come into play. It cannot be a political football either. It has to be a whole of government. And when I say whole of government, I don't mean who's in parliament and cabinet. It means the interministerial. It means the NGOs, the social sector, the merchant sector, the business sector. We all have to come together and send this lifeline out to Grenada and focus on that triangle. Is it the crime we're going at? Is it the criminal we're going at? Or is it the environment we're going at? And more importantly, understand if we're bringing harsher penalties, we have to ensure that the enforcement of these penalties is done in such a way that people can go through the prosecutorial process and be incarcerated, but our prison system is ready for these new entrants.
Thank you very much. A very impassioned response. So that's 3 no's, 1 yes-ish. And I want to bring Mr. Gill back in. I want to ask this. Mr. Gill, your stance so far suggests it's no. Some would say that harsher punishment gives the victims of crime a greater sense of justice having been played out. Where do you, as a legal professional, stand in response to a statement like that?
I'll answer it this way, and I will revert to the question which the other panelists responded to. Because we speak of harsher penalties, but have we asked ourselves, is it present penalties, the current penalties, is it not harsh enough? Is it too lenient? That's a starting point. So when we speak of harsher penalties, we cannot just speak of it in a vacuum. But what is it that the penalty is now? With regards to possession of a firearm and ammunition. The maximum in the magistrate's court, summary, 5 years imprisonment, a fine of up to $20,000. So when we speak of harsher penalties, let's put it into context. And it is my respectful view that is harsh and significant enough. Because within the legal system, we look at aggravating and mitigating factors. And when we speak of someone's in mere possession, yes, mere possession of the firearm ammunition, are you saying that 10 years, 20 years will make a difference? I represent persons every day who do not know what is the maximum sentence for possession of a firearm or ammunition. So that I would have to disagree with Mr. Hira on that point. With regards to thinking a second time, is that many of the persons who are committing offenses, really and truly, they know they face the jeopardy of going to prison.
Right.
They know they face the jeopardy of having a stiff fine. But really and truly, most of them do not have the finer points of what the maximum or the sentence in law really entails. And ACP Cohen was spot on when he spoke to the point that really and truly, I mean, even on the news and so on, in Grenada here, you find that persons do their utmost to prevent detection of the crime by using the mask, by getting vehicles without
License plate.
number plates and so on. In other words, criminal elements go out of their way to do their damnedest in terms of to prevent detection by law enforcement officers and witnesses and so on. And that the data speaks for itself, the literature speaks for itself, that harsher punishments and so on does not necessarily, it's only with regards to, doesn't necessarily deter persons from committing criminal offenses. But of course, it comes to the point, and I always say, punishment must fit the crime. Because at the same time, we need to ensure as a society that persons who commit certain offenses and so on, that they must be properly punished. And I don't think anyone will disagree with that. But we have to, as a civilization, ensure that the punishment as provided for in law does not go overboard. And that is my position, Mr.
John. I want to push back just a bit.
Get it back. You see, we need to, but Mr. Hira was correct with regards to this regional issue. Grenada is not an isolated case at all. And it takes me now to the Needham Point Declaration, which is an initiative and a conference started by the CCJ, where they speak of a comprehensive criminal justice reform. Now, in the greater context, and let us be practical, let us bring this issue to the home of our viewers and persons listening to us. The reality on the ground here is that our prison was built for a capacity of 200 persons. Yes? And as of today's date, there are 384 inmates at our prisons, with just 2 females inclusive in that. Now, right away, we see that our prisons are overcrowded. And if one were to read from the newspapers and the different press reports and so on coming out over the last month or so, a lot of what is being said in the press, at least, I do not have the intelligence, the intel as is speaking, and so, is that what is being alleged through the press and so is that the prisons may very well be a fermentation plant for the commission of these offenses which we address in this evening. So that we need to be guarded, we need to be analytical, or we need to be careful with regards to what we are asking. Yes? In other words, you do not want to create a boiling point where every time we hear someone is in possession of a firearm and so on, we say, straight to prison you must go. We say that let us remove the discretion of the magistrates. And we have highly efficient, highly competent magistrates who understand, who live in Grenada, who understand the reality on the ground. And sometimes when bail applications come to them, sometimes they do deny persons who are charged with the possession of firearms and ammunition. They do deny persons bail. And sometimes they grant bail at very stiff conditions and so on. So that we have to avoid knee-jerk reactions with regards to what we have experienced in the past 2 months and so on. And I do not want to recap what the other presenters have said tonight, but yes, the holistic, the community, the family as the microcosm of the society, the church. I have written about the church recently, and Pastor Simon, I don't know if he read the article and stuff, but it's good to see him agreeing that the church needs to do more, open up the doors and windows and go in the community and have crusades and so on, and stop driving up and down with air-conditioned vehicles and air-conditioned churches and so on. We need more in the religious community, but also we need more in the clubs and organizations, the football clubs, the cricket clubs, the cultural groups and so on, to engage our young people in positive activities and so on. But I think I will stop here for a bit.
So we have 2 comments, Pastor Simon and ACP Cohen. Want to respond, so I'll let Pastor Simon go.
I want to respond to what he's saying. I mean, there's a lot of truth in that the church is not doing as much as it should, but we have a problem. the business community do not support the church when they're doing community events. The business community would give $100,000 to a white in the moonlight or to Carnival or to some fete, right? And the church having, let's say they're having a community event to like Sunday school or vacation Bible school, and they write and want help to do it, or they're starting some swing class or something. The business community respond, and some of them is $100 and $200 that they would give, but they would give $20,000 to drinking beers and fetting and jumping up. So part of the problem we're having has been help created by the business community. They are equally to take equal responsibilities. We are the church, and the thing again that we have to look beyond ourselves. And a lot of times, as also mentioned by Ali, the prison is also a problem, because you send young men up there who do not know about crime, but they learn crime in the prison. Could we have some centers built where they could go and learn a skill? One of the big problems we're having in Grenada, and the construction field will tell you that we don't have masons and carpenters and these kind of skills. We are losing that. Could it be that the government set up schools or set up some institution that could train these young men and send them to the prison, send them there to learn a skill, and from there to come back to work? There need to be a change in the way we think, because there is a problem from the church, the business community, and government.
All right, so ACP?
I want to agree with quite a lot of what Ali has said. Deterrent is an area plagued by quite a lot of assumptions, right? And one of the assumptions is we assume that the offenders know the law and the penalties for it. And Ali made that point. Another one is that while offenders know that there will be some punishment for the act, though they know the specifics of the law. Now, quite a lot of our crimes are what you call expressive crimes, crimes of anger and passion, psychological disturbances, and so forth. So in the commission of these crimes, these offenders are not rationally thinking about the penalties and the punishment of the crime to say, well, I wouldn't do it because I know I'm going to go to prison for 10, 15 years. No, my personal position is when laws are changed, there needs to be an education process that drives the point home that we're moving from point A to point B. This is what will and could happen, from point A to point B. But by and large, these legislation passed and they're on the books. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you don't know. So most of our criminals know that there will be some form of punishment for the act, but do not necessarily know the specifics that will deter them to say, I do not want to commit that crime because I probably will go to prison for X or Y time. And I want to agree with Ali's point on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we're well overdue for our first break for the evening. We'll take a break and we'll come right back with our discussion. Is there a need for harsher penalties?
Struggling to secure a business loan because of limited credit history or loan security? The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee has the security you need. The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee, ECPCGC, is a bridge to accessible financing for micro, small, and medium enterprises in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Backed by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank with funding from the World Bank. We work with financial institutions to help MSMEs get credit to stay in business, grow their business, or invest in green technologies. Our process is simple. Apply for a loan at your local lender. If collateral is in question, our partial credit guarantee is the answer. Once you meet the criteria, we pledge up to 80% of the collateral you're short of. Reach out to an ECPCGC participating lender or visit www.ecpcgc.org for more information. The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee for MSMEs. Your business, your growth, our guarantee. the laundry, always do a full load. Save water.
This awareness initiative is part of activities under the Climate Resilient Water sector in Grenada. The project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada.
GRENLEC Community Partnership Initiative.
I'm here to say a special thank you to GRENLEC for all that they have been doing for us. Now, most recently, we are very grateful for the paving of our yard. We now have easy access to drop off, to pick up stuff, and also it serves as a recreation point. So we're very, very grateful. And again, we want to say hats off to GRENLEC for always being there for us. And we hope that God would bless the company so that you can continue to support us.
GRENLEC, energizing our community.
Get ready for the season with the biggest blowout sale from Sisson's Paints. Get 30% on Sisson's Text Coat, Berger Weatherproof, and Easy Clean paints, all sizes. Your Weather Warrior, paint to protect. Ensure your home is season ready and beautiful. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Head to the Color Shop or any Sisson's hardware partner nationwide and save 30% now. Shop now and get a free plastic float with every Sisson's Text Coat purchase and a free Paint Sensations paint with every 1 gallon purchase of Berger Weatherproof or Sisson's Easy Clean. Sale ends soon.
Use a pan to wash and rinse your dishes. Save water.
This awareness initiative is part of activities under the Climate Resilient Water sector in Grenada. The project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. We're discussing whether or not an increase in the penalties regarding crime will be and will help curb the recent spate of violence. I want to push back on a few comments that were made in our previous segment. Mr. Gill, this one is for you. You mentioned well, there are two things that Mr. Hira mentioned, and I want to piggyback off those two things. One, he mentioned quite passionately the enforcement of law. And you mentioned that increasing the penalties is not going to do anything to deter people. You feel like the current punishments are enough. So here's a question I want to put to you and to the rest of the panel. If the current punishments are harsh enough, then why is there a rising crime now? Is it a matter of the current punishments perhaps not being enforced by the ones who can enforce them?
When we use the word crimes, I don't believe, respectfully so, that we do not necessarily have an increase in the crime, spate of crimes. We have a spike in one area of crime, and that is gun-related violence. Grenada, in my respectful view, and ACP can correct us because he's probably have the data and so on. But in terms of other crimes, housebreaking and stealing, we have no kidnapping and other offenses. We really and truly do not have a serious increase in crimes, and maybe ACP is in a better position to comment on that. So that what we are discussing. I do not want us to generalize on the issue here. We're speaking about gun-related violence. I think that is our concern now in Grenada. There is no real outbreak of crime. The issue must be narrowed and limited to gun violence. So my point with regards to penalties is that punishment must fit the crime. That's my guiding principle with regards to harsher penalties. And I said that, first of all, let us look at what attains now. And what attains now is a fine of 20,000 EC dollars and the maximum sentence of 5 years. Yes? Now, from my experience, persons who plead guilty and so on, first-time offenders, for possession of arms and ammunition, they are fined anywhere in the range based on $5,000, $10,000, and so 12,000 and so. It's never really reached maximum of 20,000. Now, when we speak of ammunition, we're speaking about, for the ordinary listener viewer, we're speaking about the bullets. So sometimes it varies. Sometimes you have offenses with one bullet, and you hear ACP and the Royal Grenada Police Force speak about ammunition. And sometimes you have to look at the quantum. So you have 1 bullet, 5 bullets, 10 bullets. Sometimes you get the ammunition alone and there is no arms. You see? So there are different circumstances. Now, also too, the law provides, for instance, discharging a firearm in a public place. So that you have mere possession, where you may find a gun in a cupboard in the house, a gun below the bed, and so on. And that is treated differently than if someone was going to Market Square or somewhere and discharge a fire. So there are different, let us say, degree in how you use that illegal firearm and ammunition. And I am saying that these amendments on ACP was roughly around when? 2016 or thereabouts, or 2014, if my mind serves me right. It's not too far. So that what we've had in recent times is a consistent review of where we are with regards to criminal law and the penalties and so on. So that legislators in the past have not just sit quietly. Now, we are discussing if there is a need for harsher penalties tonight on this program. And it is topical now because of the recent state of gun violence where we had a few fatalities. And I'm saying that we ought not to simply have a knee-jerk reaction to that. And simply by one signature or two, and what we've had thus far is one reading. The Grenada Bar Association, led by President Francis Paul, wrote to the Attorney General for further consultation on these amendments, and the government has kindly conceded to that by only having one reading at the last sitting, because we want to be able to have a further discussion, look at where we are, do some more research, and to say to the government, we believe you are going a little overboard, or maybe you can consider these alternatives and so on. So as part of the peace initiative by the Grenada Bar Association, that's why we said we want to look at it holistically. Let us look at the proposed amendments by the government, in a holistic manner, and say and give whatever counsel or advice. Of course, we cannot tell the government what to do. At the end of the day, we are not the legislators, but we can at least have a conversation and say to the government that, listen, we think that the legislation is not so bad as it is. And that is why I said, and we need to contextualize where we are. And I do not believe that the present provision with regards to penalties for mere possession and so is too lenient at all. And there are, as ACP can testify, there are different offenses related to the use of illegal firearms and so on. So it's not just mere possession. And that is what we need to share with our viewers and listeners and so on this program, so that we give persons a more accurate picture. Because as ACP pointed out, a lot of persons hear about the crime and so on, yes, let's jail them, yes. But what is it that attains now? And I think what attains now is really and truly not too bad.
All right. Before you respond, ACP, we will open the phone lines, so viewers at home, feel free to call in, share your views on our topic for discussion this evening. Our number 440-1252. So we look forward to your calls, and ACP, feel free to respond.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point to support what Mr. Gila said, because I don't want the population start thinking that we have a rise in crime. I'm responsible for crimes, so I'm speaking from a position of knowledge. And Ali is right. We have seen spike in certain areas. We have had significant contraction in quite a large category of our crimes. We have seen sexual offenses dip significantly. We have seen quite a lot of our crimes dip significantly. While I will be quick to agree, and I've done so before, that we have seen an influx in gun crimes.
Right.
Crimes in a whole is in decline. I have heard politicians, members of the community, I've listened to calling programs. People believe in saying that, hey, we have a rise in crime in Grenada. I want to send a message out there. We do not have a rise in crime. Our crime is stable and it is reducing.
Excellent. So we have our first caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I would like to share on the program tonight. Very interested, but I almost want to say I would like to see deeper punishment. But the reason why I would say no is simple because the system nowadays, it seems like we're putting things in place. For instance, growing up, you hear do not spoil the child and spare the rod. But we're removing disciplining in school. Parents have to be careful now even how they talk to the children. I mean, no punishment already put down by principal and the ministry to help guide our young people. And that is the time I think we should really instill the do's and don'ts in our young people. But instead of that, we slacken on that. So not much penalty or punishment is being done in school no more. But when big man and woman is like we're trying to bend the tree while it's old. So now we want to put steeper penalty by doing wrong. If we try to correct our young people from that small age, I mean, I get lashed. All of us, even mostly everybody on the panel there, was disciplined. We're not asking them to abuse, but try to guide our young people. I mean, the church, put system in place where you need the parents to come in and learn how to deal with children, how to discipline children, how to guide our children. And once we instill this kind of value, then growing up now, they will have second thought. They know when they do something wrong, there is punishment towards it. And that will help guide and shape our young people more. And instead of when they're old, trying to punish them for something, we should be guiding them from them small. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, caller. Mr. Hira, I'd like you to weigh in here.
Yeah, sure. Again, I'm complimenting the contributions of the panelists, and it's good to have that sort of angled approach where everybody is kind of saying different things, but we are focusing really on that sort of the safety line. For Grenada at this point, and I'm complimenting the caller also as the focus that's zoning in on the parenting. But we have to pay attention, and I'm speaking strictly from a research-based perspective, guys, as a regional security expert looking at it, facing across the spectrum of the Caribbean. we are dealing with a different Grenada. We are dealing with a different Caribbean. We are dealing with a different Grenadian at this point, and a different Caribbean citizen, where the think pattern before could have been instituted from that parenting, from that home. I think ACP drew reference to the old adage where we talked about it takes a village to raise a child. Now you can't even speak to a child. And we have to understand something called instruction. And laws, as we are speaking about here this evening, and in his full respect to Mr. Gillen, from the angle that he is presenting his advocacy, is the fact that laws are instructions. It is instructions of how we are staying in the safe lane, how we are walking the straight and narrow. And if you drift left or right of that, then you are disobeying, or you are not following the instructions that you're given in order to be obedient or law-abiding. Let's just go into the gangs and the gun crimes, and we are correct. Statistically, Grenada is on a low when it comes to the normal crimes, the home invasions, the burglaries, rapes, the kidnappings, down low. But there's a rise when it comes to the use of the gun-related crimes, high-powered weapons. Do you know what it is when a high-powered weapon shatters the quietness of a village, where you have AR-15s being fired against each other, of car passes in a peaceful village in Grenada, and high-powered weapons have been shot? How it shatters that whole village and the quietness and fear that is instilled into the citizen. So that's where I come to instruction. If it is that we have an issue regarding harsher instructions in order to prevent, let's look at what is happening to the young 18-year-old, the 17-year-old who's on the road with an AR-15 or an AK-47 carrying out an instruction from a gang leader seated somewhere under a shed or under a house on a cell phone to execute another Grenadian. He's carrying out an instruction and obeying that instruction to kill and to shoot up the place and to cause disarray and bring a fear into what was Grenada that we know as the Peaceful Isle, this peaceful Spice Isle. So my thing is, guys, as we look into this whole aspect of fixing the situation, we have to understand how can we block our young people from receiving the instructions to execute crimes and execute one and become a shooter. Where have we lost control of the mindset and the ideology of these young people? I think the pastor spoke about it. We have to also focus on the restructuring of our prison system. Because if we're going to move people off of the streets into the prison system, we should have a structured system of reformation of vocational studies or preparations for civilian life to bring them back into society, where they don't have to come back into society as a graduate of a crime institute as the prisons, but as a graduate of the prison system, skilled in order to bring some sort of skill set to a trade or to earn a legal living. And therefore, guys, my conversation here with us tonight is an instruction is law to do the right thing. The flip side of that is that our young people are receiving an instruction by their gang leaders or by those who are in control to carry out crimes and to execute their fellow citizens. That is where Grenada has reached. That is the problem on the ground. That is the situation, not only the politics or the police or the law enforcement or the business fraternity. We as a country have to recognize that the thing is a bubbling bomb. It's something that if we don't fix immediately, we can explode and we can implode. And this is not what Grenada wants.
You see, because political expediency, trying to get things done for political reason really wouldn't help us. We had to be careful with that. And that bridge of rebuilding, as rightly said, that we have to collectively look at how can we work together to get that done. The government have to look at the reform need to take place, the laws that need to change, or the law and the books that we need to keep. The police need to talk with the church need to talk with the police. We all need to talk with the community and begin to form a collective effort to see how that we can bring ourselves to a place where we can be effective, because on our own we cannot do it. We are a population of just 110,000. It's a village in many countries in Trinidad. Maybe just a village. But also, I think one of the problems we face at the bigger picture, these big organizations, the World Bank and those folks who are coming in, also when we're borrowing money, they bring in the North American thing for us, and from England, from Canada, which has not worked for them. It has created more problems for them, and they are bringing things to us that we must adopt that they know haven't worked for them. We have to be at a point where we begin to stand up and say, no, we're not accepting this because it will not help us.
ACP.
Yeah, well, I quite agree with a lot of what Mr. Hera has said, except that let's stick to the script tonight. Has a will stiffer penalty act as a deterrent? I think I've made my position on that, but I agree with him. The point I'm making is, and supporting what he's saying, what we need, as Pastor Simon has said it, is collective effort. You do not just change the law and hope overnight miracle is going to happen. Where is the other support system? You send them to the prison. Where is the space?
So we have a caller. I'll let you continue. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Very interesting program. But my heart burns me very much when I listen. And we talk a lot of talk. I've been listening to many programs. We talk, but there is no action. When I say no action, now Grenada, like the rest of the world, is experiencing some prophetic things. The Bible says in the latter days, violence will be great in the earth. So we cannot dismiss that. And that is so because we have departed from God in the biggest way we can. Day by day, we are pushing God out of our society, out of our homes, out of our schools, out of every facet of life. We are pushing God out. So therefore, this is the result. What I believe God wants for Grenada, what God wants for the Grenada is that Grenada, for about 3 years now, God is calling, many different persons have stated it on different radio stations. Grenada needs to have a national day of prayer and repentance. That is God's command. That is God's demand. That is what God wants. And if we do it, we call it that national prayer and repentance. God will forgive the sins of His nation. He will impact our young people. There will be a massive change in Grenada because God loves this nation. God loves Grenada with a passion, and we have to.
All right, Pastor Simon, I know.
You see, I keep hearing people calling for this National Day of Prayer. I agree we should pray, and we have been praying. The problem is the church is not taking action enough you have over 300 churches in Grenada. We divide it, right? And that is part of the problem. When a church has something, we don't support each other. We as churches in our community and villages have to come together and begin to address the issues and deal with it collectively. It is not an individual thing. It's not a denomination thing. And we call in for time of prayer, but prayer is one part of that. Even when we call for prayer, the church don't come together to pray. A National Day of Prayer, who is going to lead it? The government? The government can lead a National Day of Prayer. It's the church that have to lead it. So we pastors have to come with our high horses and come out of our religious denomination and begin to understand that we need to work together to fulfill the purpose of helping our society to be better. That, to me, is where we need to go.
Excellent. We have another caller online. Caller, good evening.
Oh, good evening to you, sir. Good evening to you, panelists. I'll tell you something. Listening to this thing, my heart bleed. We are at war. Many years ago, I pointed out to the Social Services Division that we were sitting on a socio-time bomb. Based on what I observed, with the young people in particular, they are restless. However, we have damaged the young people. I've said it over and over. We have damaged the young people. We have damaged the citizens. We have left them behind economically, and they are trying to catch up. Now, the group of people that is most responsible for this is the politicians. They are the ones that is creating the problem in the society, where they put the nation's people together, not giving them a hope, not giving them a chance to develop financially, economically. And therefore, what we are seeing here now is the symptom because how do we solve this problem? The economy has to play a pivotal role. We have to get the economy going to avoid all these things. So the young people have something to do. The parents of the young people who also need something to do. So it's a compounded situation we have there. But our politicians have to understand that they have a responsibility to the well-being of the citizens. You have to put the citizens in a situation where we all can take care of ourselves. In the absence of this, that is what you're seeing here. The war, and I said it just continues. It just starts.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for your contribution, caller. Mr. Gill, I'd love for you to weigh in here.
No, I think the caller is spot on, and he's addressing a very important issue. And that is the issue of the marginalization of sectors of our population and so on. A lot of young people, the unemployment rate, we need to look at that. And the fact that we need to provide employment opportunities, financial opportunities for young people. Is it that as our society, quote unquote, continue to develop and so that we are creating a wider gap between an emerging middle class and the lower class? In that, yes, they may be earning $1, but when they see persons earning $100, much more than them, that they feel marginalized in the society. So that is a very, and ACP spoke to that earlier. So that is a very critical area of the issue of employment, the issue of addressing basic needs of certain households and certain communities and so on. That's a very important aspect that the caller is speaking about. And that, too, must be part of a government program, not just legislation, amending legislation, but how do we then address the vulnerable persons in our society, and even the Bible spoke about it. He spoke about, Pastor Simon can pull up the exact verse and so, but what do we do to the least among us? A civilization is marked, a civilization is not just about, it's not guarded or scored based on what we do for the most fortunate or the high upper class and so on, but it's what we do for the least of our brothers and sisters, and we have to ensure that we have serious social net programs that will capture the vulnerable ones, and I'm not just talking here about handouts. Okay, for instance, we just had an amendment with regards to the compulsory age of schoolgoers, move from 16 to 17. Yes, and that maybe is commendable. But the issue in education continues to be the issue of content. The issue, and by content I mean, you have a large academic program, but what is happening with our technical programs? And Pastor Simon spoke about the fact that we don't have masons, we don't have enough masons, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and so on to satisfy the construction sector. So that if we're speaking of serious education reform, it's not just about the age. Right. To me, it begins with the curriculum that has been taught to ensure that persons leaving secondary and college, that they are ready for the job market. Now we have persons, I think CXC finished now, but you have persons writing 12, 13, 14, 15 subjects. How does that prepare one to enter the job market? And if they do not get a job after having all these subjects, the frustration that step in. Why did I go to school? I don't know. I have all these subjects and yet can't get a job. So that we have to look at the reforming as well, the entire education system, and prepare young people for the job market. It's an extremely important issue that I believe will take an entirely new program by GBN to look at. The issue of what do we do with our young people? How do we prepare them for the job market? How do we prepare them for life?
Mr. Gill, let me just jump in here. So you mentioned the widening gap between the income brackets. And oftentimes there are comments floating around within the society that suggest that there's a different level and amount and expediency in terms of access to justice based on your income bracket. As a member of the legal fraternity, the statement is justice delayed is justice denied. The court system seems to be slow. And for the victims of gun-related violence, the frustration that you just mentioned tends to set in. Why is the legal system, the justice system, why is it so seemingly so slow, so cumbersome? Why does justice seem delayed for some?
Because governments need to invest in the justice system. Since Hurricane Ivan, we haven't had a proper, we have been renting buildings to have courts. So that one, we need to build a hall of justice, properly staffed, properly trained staff, where we have the facilities with sufficient judges, magistrates, prosecutors, and so that's one aspect of it. Secondly, the issue of employing new diversion strategies to deal with young offenders. So not every offense that has to end up in the court system. Yes, so that we try to they call it diversion with regards to our young offenders.
Right.
Also, we need to look at expanding the jurisdiction of the magistrates so that they can deal with more substantive matters without more matters reaching to the High Court. Thirdly, we have a dual system now of paper committal. To send matters to the High Court, you first have what we call a preliminary inquiry, where we have to go through really and truly a sort of a mini trial at the magistrate's court. And then there's another system called paper committal, where the witnesses' statements will be signed, read by the magistrate and then the defense counsel have to agree that the matters can go to the High Court. While other countries have implemented a paper committal system where they have completely abolished the old preliminary inquiry system and they go straight to paper committal. That saves time. So that is why we speak of a complete overhaul of the justice system. Now, earlier on you spoke about persons victims of crime, and then we need to establish a protocol of what we refer to as victim or survivors of crime charter, where they too have rights. In some jurisdictions, they can speak directly to judges and magistrates with regards to the sort of sentences that they would like to see. Now there's a new thought process, new thinking with regards of establishing a criminal victim compensation fund. Because on many occasions, or if not most occasions, the persons committing the crime cannot adequately compensate the victim for his or her loss. And you see a new development now where the state is stepping in to absorb some of the pain and the loss that a particular victim would have suffered. So to answer your question, there are many strategies which can be employed to enhance the efficiency of the court system. But what it means, though, is it calls for a comprehensive reform of the system, of the criminal justice system. And that also involves the prison. Now, when I spoke earlier about the capacity of our prison of 200 persons, I know I have not heard anyone gone publicly to say, but we need a new prison. We need a new prison with modern facilities and so on, with highly trained prison officers in areas of psychology, sociology, and so on. Then also the technical aspects. And let me commend our rehabilitation efforts, our education program, and so on in the prison, which for years have been the leading light in the Caribbean. Right? We've had our prisoners doing very well at school, leaving and obtaining first degrees and so on and so forth. And there are very good efforts in the prison and so on in regards to education. But that needs to be expanded to other areas of rehabilitation so that we do not create a situation, and ACP spoke about 60% of recidivism, of persons who have committed offenses, repeating committing offenses. We need to buck the trend whereby persons can, and Mr. Hira spoke about it as well. When they go to prison, they can achieve some life skills and so on and so forth. One, they can achieve the life skills, but also they can get the necessary counseling that will shift them away from a path of committing criminal offenses and so on and so forth. So it is a comprehensive overhaul of the criminal justice system that starts with the police, providing the police with the resources that they need, not just uniform and vehicles and so on, but now we're talking cybercrime. We're talking, so they need to have all this different technology, CCTV cameras and so on and so forth in certain areas, certain hotspots on the streets and so on and so that, yeah, it's a lot. But it can be done, and we have to start at one place. It can be done. It cannot be done in a year, 2 years, but we have to start strategically by comprehensively reforming the judicial system. And a good place to start is a hall of justice and a brand new prison.
Excellent. So
new prison facility. That the prison facility that we have has outlived its usefulness.
All right. So thank you very much for your contributions, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure discussing this with you this evening. We are just about out of time. I'd like us to close answering this question. Mr. Hira mentioned the crime triangle. He mentioned a need for a decision as to where we start pooling our efforts. So as we close out our program this evening, when we wake up tomorrow, God's willing, where do we start?
For me, I think when I look at the St. George's Baptist Church and what we are doing, I could speak from that point of view, is getting involved in the community. We're doing some work with Trailblazers in St. David. We are working now with some football teams that we want to reach out to. Young kids, 12 and 13 in Russel, we want to reach out. We have the church, we reach out to them, working with Grenada Baptist. But also trying to reach out to the other churches in the community for us, working with the Pentecostal, working with the Catholic Church, and trying to pull together and see how best we can address the issues within our space, but at the same time work with the police and asking them what would they need. We are about to sign a memorandum of understanding with the prison to work with them. So these are specific things that we are doing because we think we have a role to play, and I think that's what needs to happen, not just talking that we do. I think something that is very critical that we haven't gone into is the one of looking at our educational reform. We really need to do something about it. This, Ali spoke about it. This coming out of 10 and 15 subjects. I'm looking for a carpenter, I can't find one. Mason, we can't get that. What we need is skills, and the government needs to seriously address that, because in 5-10 years, well, no, we have the problem. 10 years from now, it could be even worse. So it needs to be addressed. And I think collectively, we need to work more, put the structure together, the community, the police, the churches, the NGOs to be able to address our issues.
Excellent. Well said. Mr. Hira, I'd like you to answer this question. Where do we start when we wake up tomorrow, God's willing?
Yeah, I think it's very important. We all spoke about some of the mobilizations in various areas. I want to commend Mr. Gill on some of the visionaries that he would have alluded to, especially with the new prisons and all that. And I think the focus should really be the environment, which speaks a lot to what Pastor said and what the ACP would have said. This involves the community. This involves the environment could be simply just putting up lights. The environment could be meeting these young men on the streets and trying to curb their whole thinking. So you deal with the environment and you fix the environment environment so that it does not favor or harbor criminal activity. The crime and the criminality will in fact be diminished. It will come down because we have fixed the environment that involves the people and the infrastructural sort of development that can produce the better Grenadian at the end of the day and move that person away from criminal intent. I want to use this opportunity to talk about quite quickly, and I ask for your respect on this, the concept of a dynamic of patrimonialism. And patrimonialism speaks about when the state has lost contact with the ground. And when the state has lost contact with the ground, something comes up in the middle that sort of provides for the ground all of the necessities of socio-economy and the living, the buying of the school books, the taking the old lady to the church and helping her out with her health bills and putting a roof on her house and building a bridge in a community. That system that comes up in the middle there begins to control the community, and this is where we find the onset of the gang culture starting to rise and to flourish. Because what happens is that the state no longer has contact with the ground, something else is controlling the community, and therefore the community has to agree and conform with the instructions of this new control system. And if the state needs to talk to the ground, it has to go through that center system. And this is what we are seeing. We're seeing a concept of patrimonialism where something has turned up in the middle and is controlling the young people, and the state has no more control to the ground, and it is now being controlled by the gang culture. And I say this, I've said it in Trinidad, I've said it all over the region. We are not to entertain or give oxygen to the gang culture being part of our social fabric. We must destroy that. We must move that aside. Anytime we start to give credence and give oxygen to the gang culture as part of our social fabric, we've lost the war.
Very well said, sir. Mr. Gill, where do we start tomorrow, God's willing?
Well, we have already started. The Grenada Bar Peace Initiative is an excellent way to start. I believe where we are now, we need to continue to champion a ceasefire between rival group of young men and women, whoever involved. So we have been reaching out to the communities, reaching out to the leaders in certain areas, certain blocks, certain sections. So the Grenada Bar Peace Initiative and the initiatives that Pastor Simon speak about, it's very important that for now we need to stabilize. We need to have a ceasefire. We need to get young men to turn in the weapons, and I would use this opportunity to encourage persons to make use of the gun amnesty. And I can say to them that any attorney, a member of the Greater Bar Association is willing to assist them in bringing in that firearm, illegal firearm and ammunition. We are making ourselves available to that. So we want to ask persons and encourage persons to take advantage of the gun amnesty that the government has now embarked upon, so that immediately what we are about is to, as much as is possible, to have a ceasefire. Stop the gun violence now. Stop the gun violence now. Bring in the firearms. Utilize the amnesty. And as I said, all of the members of the Grenada Bar Association are willing to make themselves available to assist in this regard. So that is where we need to start tonight and tomorrow. In the long term, we need to embark upon a comprehensive criminal justice reform, from beginning with the police force in terms of making sure that they have all of the training and equipments and tools that they need to do their work. And that involves, we need to see persons at the various police stations who are developing expertise in dealing with young offenders and so on, right? It's not just a simple matter of using force. So we need to continue to advocate for the modernization of our police force. Secondly, we need to see within the justice system less delay, cut out the delay, more efficient prosecution and completion of matters through the court system, and also through the prison system. But as I said, we definitely need a new prison facility, but we need in Grenada to also conform to the subscribe to the Mandela rules and the Mandela prison rules in terms of incarceration, ensuring that persons are treated fairly, that their human rights are protected, that they are treated with human dignity, and so on. I think that the days for when persons who are arrested for questioning and so on, they cannot, in this time and this day and in this age, be sleeping on concrete floors in police cells across the country or on cardboard. We need proper prison facilities. Could you imagine, we had a heat wave and everybody in the house talking about how hot it is. Could you imagine how hot it is in the prison cells and in the police cells and so on? And Nelson Mandela spoke about the need to have windows in every cell, of course with the iron bars and so on and so forth. But we need to, at all levels, ensure that our human rights are protected from prisoner to victim. The victim protocol as well. How do we treat with young persons who have suffered from criminal offenses, the counseling that they need, the assistance that they need to put and to piece their lives back together. So that there's a lot of work ahead of us. A lot of work ahead of us for us to be where we want to be. But in immediate, let us start with the peace initiatives of the Bar Association and to support Pastor Simon and the work of his church and so on to ensure that we can have a ceasefire.
Thank you so much.
Let's end the violence now.
ACP Cohen, you are going to close us off.
I want to wake up tomorrow morning with a police force that are more technologically savvy, that more intelligence driven. Mr. Heron made the point earlier, and I'll close by piggybacking on it. The literature suggests that what acts as a deterrent is swift arrest and prosecution of offenders. Security is expensive. The police force is an arm of government, and so we depend on government through the budgetary allocation so that the police force can do what it needs to do. I think we have come to the point where the reliance and dependence on government has to be shifted. I think corporate Grenada has a part to play, has a role to play. I don't think we can continue to depend solely on government budget to run the police force, because government have to split that pie up for everybody else in the public sector. And so security can only get that amount, but it takes this amount to properly drive the kind of security that we want to see, the kind of advancement that we want to see, the kind of technology that we want to have. Ask me, we know what it is that is needed to be done. We know how to do it, right, but the means of getting it done sometimes is where the problem lies. And so I wish I can wake up tomorrow with a police force that says, listen, we can do 5 times more than we are currently doing because we have the tools and equipment to get it done. And so I'm going to use the appeal tonight to say that we want to collaborate as a police force. We have been collaborating. We have been having good relationship with members of our community in different sectors. We want to deepen that type of collaboration. We want to strengthen that collaboration going forward. We want every Grenadian to see themselves as a law enforcement officer. Even if you're not being paid by the state, but you have an interest in your own safety, the safety of your children, and the safety of your grandchildren. Grenada belongs to us all, and we all must have shared responsibility for the continued peace, safety, and tranquility of our nation.
Very well said, and once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This has been Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you.